What would you do if you found a scared, injured child crying in your backyard during a thunderstorm? Most people would help without question. But what if that child had silver skin that shimmered like moonlight, eyes that glowed faintly in the dark, and spoke in a language that sounded like wind chimes? What if helping her meant facing the deadliest assassin in 3 galaxies, who also happened to be her mother? This is the story of Marcus Chun, a lonely mechanic who thought his biggest problem was fixing broken cars in a forgotten corner of Earth. He had no idea that one act of kindness would drag him into an intergalactic war, force him to question everything he believed about humanity's place in the universe, and prove that sometimes the most ordinary people are capable of the most extraordinary things. Sometimes the universe doesn't ask if you're ready to be a hero. Sometimes it just drops a scared little girl at your doorstep and waits to see what you're made of. Marcus Chun wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag, listening to the thunder rumble overhead like an angry giant. His auto repair shop sat on the edge of Millfield, a town so small that most GPS systems treated it as a suggestion rather than a destination. The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof, creating a steady rhythm that had kept him company for the past 3 hours while he worked on Mrs. Henderson's ancient pickup truck. At 32, Marcus had grown comfortable with solitude. His customers were few but loyal, mostly farmers and retirees who appreciated his honest work and fair prices. He lived in a small apartment above his shop, ordered takeout from the same 3 restaurants, and spent his evenings reading science fiction novels that his younger self would have laughed at. Life was predictable, quiet, and exactly the way he liked it. The sound that cut through the storm was definitely not thunder. Marcus froze, his wrench halfway to the truck's engine block. The noise came again, a high-pitched keening that made his teeth ache and sent shivers down his spine. It sounded like metal being torn apart, but wrong somehow, as if the metal was screaming. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside, immediately regretting not putting on jacket. The rain soaked through his work shirt in seconds, cold droplets finding every gap in the fabric. The sound had stopped, leaving only the natural chaos of the storm. Lightning illuminated the small yard behind his shop, and in that brief moment of clarity, Marcus saw something that made him question his sanity. A shallow crater had appeared in his carefully maintained patch of grass, still smoking despite the downpour. The edges looked melted rather than broken, as if something incredibly hot had kissed the earth. He approached slowly, flashlight beam dancing across the scene. The crater was maybe 6 feet wide and perfectly circular, with soil that had turned to glass around the rim. In the center, partially buried in the soft earth, lay what looked like a large metal egg. Marcus had seen enough science fiction movies to recognize a spacecraft when he saw one, even if this one was about the size of a refrigerator. The surface was smooth and pearl white, with no visible seams or markings. As he watched, a section of the hull simply dissolved away, revealing a dark interior. A small figure tumbled out onto the wet grass. Marcus's first thought was that it was a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old. His second thought was that no human child had ever looked like this. The girl's skin was silver, not painted or tattooed, but naturally metallic with an inner glow that caught the flashlight beam and reflected it back in soft patterns. Her hair was white as fresh snow and seemed to move independently of the wind, floating around her head like she was underwater. She was also clearly terrified. The girl curled into a ball, making soft sounds that reminded Marcus of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Her clothes, if they could be called that, appeared to be made of the same material as her spacecraft, flowing and seamless, adjusting to her movements like liquid metal. Marcus stood frozen for a long moment, rain running down his face. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this was impossible, that he should call the police or the military or NASA, or someone who knew how to handle situations involving crashed alien spacecraft and scared extraterrestrial children. Instead, he knelt down and spoke in the gentlest voice he could manage. "Hey there, sweetheart. It's okay. You're safe." The girl looked up at him with eyes that were pools of liquid starlight, silver and deep and ancient despite her young face. She said something in a language that sounded like music, her voice urgent and pleading. Marcus slowly extended his hand, palm up, the same way he might approach a frightened animal. "I don't understand your words, but I can see you're scared. I want to help. She stared at his hand for what felt like an eternity, then reached out with one small finger to touch his palm. Her skin was warm, which surprised him, and where she touched him, he felt a strange tingling sensation, like a very mild electric shock. Suddenly, images flooded his mind. Not his own memories, but hers. He saw vast cities that hung in space like jewels, ships the size of continents drifting between stars, and beings of incredible beauty and terrible power. He saw war, fleets of vessels locked in combat across the void, entire worlds burning, and through it all, the desperate flight of one small ship carrying its precious cargo toward a backwater planet that most galactic civilizations had never heard of. He saw her fear, her confusion, and her overwhelming loneliness. The connection lasted only seconds, but when it ended, Marcus understood that this child had traveled further than he could imagine to reach this small town in the middle of nowhere. She was alone, afraid, and completely dependent on the kindness of a stranger who still had grease under his fingernails and a mortgage payment due next week. "Okay," he said softly, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. "Let's get you out of this rain." The girl allowed him to help her to her feet, though she kept glancing back at her spacecraft with obvious concern. Marcus looked at the craft too, wondering what he was supposed to do with a crashed UFO in his backyard. The hull was already beginning to dissolve, breaking down into what looked like harmless metallic dust that the rain quickly washed away. Self-destructing alien technology. Of course, he guided the girl toward his shop, noting that she moved with an odd, floating grace that made it seem like gravity affected her differently. Her feet barely touched the ground, and she left no footprints in the mud. Inside the shop, Marcus grabbed a clean tarp and draped it around her shoulders. She pulled it close, though he wasn't sure if she was actually cold or simply mimicking what she thought he expected her to do. "I'm Marcus," he said, pointing to himself. "Marcus." She tilted her head, considering. When she spoke, the word came out slightly wrong, but recognizable. "Marcus." He smiled. "That's right. What's your name?" She spoke a word that sounded like silver bells mixed with distant thunder. When she saw his confused expression, she tried again, simplifying the sound until it became something his human tongue could manage. "Zara," he repeated, and she nodded enthusiastically. Zara looked around the shop with obvious curiosity, her glowing eyes taking in the tools, the cars, and the various mechanical parts scattered on workbenches. She approached Mrs. Henderson's pickup truck and placed her hand on the hood, closing her eyes. The truck's engine started. Marcus stared as the old pickup purred to life with a smoothness it hadn't possessed in at least 5 years. Zara opened her eyes and looked at him expectantly, as if she'd just performed a simple party trick rather than somehow diagnosing and fixing a complex mechanical problem through touch alone. "Well," Marcus said weakly, "that's definitely not something you learn in mechanic school." Zara seemed to understand his tone, if not his words. She smiled for the first time since emerging from her crashed ship, and Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest. The expression transformed her alien features, making her look less like a creature from another world and more like what she truly was, a frightened child who needed help. He spent the next hour trying to communicate with her, using gestures and simple words. Gradually, he pieced together fragments of her story. She was running from something, had been traveling for a long time, and was looking for someone or something called the Guardian. The word seemed important to her, though Marcus had no idea what it meant. When Zara began to sway with exhaustion, Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible 6 hours earlier. He led her upstairs to his small apartment and showed her the spare bedroom he'd been using for storage. "You can sleep here," he said, clearing books and boxes off the narrow bed. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next." Zara sat on the edge of the bed and looked up at him with those remarkable eyes. She said something in her musical language, then tried again in English. "Thank you, Marcus." The words were heavily accented, but clearly sincere. She touched his hand again briefly, and this time the mental connection was gentler, carrying only warmth and gratitude. As Marcus prepared for bed in his own room, he couldn't help but wonder what he'd gotten himself into. He was harboring an alien refugee in his spare bedroom, and he didn't even know why she was running or from whom. For all he knew, She could be a dangerous criminal or the carrier of some exotic space plague. But when he thought about her frightened expression and the way she'd reached out to him for help, those concerns seemed absurd. Zara was just a scared little girl, regardless of which planet she'd come from. And if there was one thing Marcus had learned from his science fiction novels, it was that helping people in need was never the wrong choice, even when it led to complications. He was settling into sleep when the sound woke him, a deep, thrumming vibration that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Marcus sat up, his heart already racing, and crept to the window. 3 ships hung in the sky above his shop. They were nothing like Zara's small craft. These were predators, sleek and dark and bristling with weapons that Marcus couldn't identify, but definitely didn't want to be on the receiving end of. They moved with purpose, scanning the area with beams of red light that cut through the darkness like surgical lasers. Marcus grabbed his clothes and hurried to Zara's room. She was already awake, sitting rigid on the bed with her hands pressed to her temples. Her skin had gone pale silver, and she was whispering urgently in her own language. "Zara, what's happening? Are those ships looking for you?" She turned to him, and the terror in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. She spoke rapidly, mixing her language with broken English. "Hunters, find me, must go. Marcus in danger." The red scanning beams swept closer to the shop, and Marcus made another decision that surprised him with its clarity. He wasn't letting them take her. He didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but everything about those ships screamed bad news. If Zara was running from them, then she was running for good reason. "We're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "This is my home, and you're under my protection now." Zara stared at him as if he'd declared his intention to arm wrestle Star. Marcus, not understand. Their Kethvar, death singers kill all who help escaped once. The scanning beam passed directly over the shop, and Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation, as if something was trying to reach into his thoughts. But instead of the invasive probe he expected, the sensation simply stopped. The beam moved on, as if it had found nothing of interest. Zara looked just as surprised as Marcus felt. She stared at him with new intensity, then slowly reached out to touch his forehead. The mental connection formed again, and this time Marcus felt her sense of wonder and growing hope. "You are." She paused, struggling with the English. "You are protected, shielded. The song cannot touch your mind." Marcus had no idea what that meant, but the implications made him uneasy. "Is that why you were looking for a guardian? Someone who's immune to their mental probes?" Zara nodded eagerly. "Guardian protects the lost ones. Helps them find new home. You are Guardian, Marcus. That is why my ship brought me here." The ships above began to move away, their search apparently unsuccessful. Marcus watched them disappear into the storm clouds, his mind racing. If what Zara was saying was true, then his life had just become infinitely more complicated. He wasn't just harboring an alien refugee anymore. He was apparently some kind of chosen protector, complete with built-in psychic defenses he didn't know he possessed. The rational part of his mind wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. 24 hours ago, his biggest concern had been whether to raise his labor rates by $5 an hour. Now, he was supposedly a guardian, whatever that meant, responsible for protecting alien children from something called death singers. But as he looked at Zara, seeing the hope in her ancient eyes, Marcus found that he didn't care about the rational response. Sometimes life threw you a curveball that changed everything, and your only choice was to swing for the fences and hope for the best. "Okay," he said, settling back into the chair beside her bed. "I guess I'm a guardian now. So tell me everything I need to know about these death singers and why they're hunting you." Zara smiled, and for the first time since crashing into his backyard, she looked like she might actually believe she was safe. As she began to speak, mixing her musical language with increasingly confident English, Marcus realized that his quiet, predictable life was officially over. And, strangely enough, he found himself looking forward to what came next. Marcus woke to the smell of something burning and the sound of what could only be described as controlled chaos coming from his kitchen. Sunlight streamed through his bedroom window, making the previous night's events feel like an elaborate dream until he heard Zara's musical voice mixing with the unmistakable sizzle of something going very wrong on his stovetop. He stumbled downstairs to find his kitchen transformed into what looked like the aftermath of a small explosion. Every cabinet was open, contents scattered across counters, and Zara stood in the middle of it all, holding a smoking pan with an expression of intense concentration. She had somehow managed to change clothes overnight. Her metallic outfit had shifted into something that looked remarkably like a simplified version of his own work clothes, complete with a miniature tool belt that definitely hadn't existed the night before. "Good morning," he managed, surveying the wreckage. "Having some trouble with breakfast?" Zara looked up at him with those luminous eyes, her face scrunched in frustration. "Earth food difficult. Too many strange chemicals. Too much solid." Marcus approached carefully, noting that whatever she'd been trying to cook had turned into something that looked like charcoal, but smelled like ozone and copper pennies. "What exactly were you trying to make?" "Morning nourishment." She gestured at the disaster around her. "My people eat energy, light, warmth. Your food is all pieces." That explained a lot. Marcus gently took the pan from her hands and set it in the sink, where it immediately began dissolving whatever remained of her culinary experiment. "How about I handle breakfast today, and we can work on adapting your diet gradually?" As he prepared simple scrambled eggs and toast, Marcus found himself stealing glances at his unexpected houseguest. In daylight, Zara's alien nature was even more apparent. Her skin seemed to shimmer with its own internal light, and her white hair moved as if suspended in water rather than air. When she laughed at his commentary about the proper way to crack eggs, the sound was like wind chimes mixed with distant starlight. "Tell me about your people," Marcus said as they sat at his small kitchen table. "Where are you from?" Zara's expression grew distant. "Veltor, city ship that travels between stars. We are wanderers, always moving, always searching for new songs." "Songs?" She touched his hand, and suddenly Marcus could see it, a vast crystalline city floating in the void between galaxies, its spires reaching toward distant stars. Beings of light and metal moved through corridors that hummed with music that wasn't quite sound, their very existence a harmony that resonated across space itself. "My people sing the universe," Zara explained when the vision faded. "We find the music in stars, in planets, in the spaces between spaces. Each song makes us stronger, more complete." Marcus tried to wrap his mind around the concept. "So you like cosmic musicians?" "More than that." Her face darkened. "Songs have power. Can heal, can create, can—" She struggled with the words. "Can make dead things live again. But some songs are dangerous. Dark songs. Songs that hungry ones want to steal. The Kethvar." Marcus was beginning to understand. "The death singers. They want your people's music." Zara nodded gravely. "They take songs by force, rip them from singers' minds, leaves nothing behind but emptiness. They have been hunting my people for many cycles, stealing our knowledge, our power. And you escaped." "I am." She paused, clearly uncomfortable. "I carry the deep song, the oldest music from the first singers. Mother and council decided I must be hidden until the hunting time ends." Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing this information. So Zara wasn't just any refugee. She was carrying what sounded like the musical equivalent of nuclear launch codes. No wonder the Death Singers were searching for her with such determination. "How long have you been running?" 7 cycles. Moving from ship to ship, system to system. Always one step ahead of hunters. Her voice became very small. "Until yesterday, they found our hiding place. Mother put me in escape pod, told me to find the Guardian." "How did she know to send you to Earth?" "To me specifically?" Zara's expression became puzzled. The deep song showed her. It said Guardian would be here, would have the silent mind. Silent mind? A mind that cannot be read or touched by the song's stealers. Very rare. Most creatures' thoughts sing constantly. The Kethvar can hear them, track them, control them. But some minds are quiet, protected. She studied his face intently. "You do not sing, Marcus. Your thoughts are wrapped in silence." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying I'm some kind of mutant?" "Not mutant. Special. Chosen." Zara's eyes began to glow more brightly. "The universe sometimes makes protectors. Beings who can stand against the dark songs and not be broken." Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and sighed. "Mrs. Henderson. I should take this." "Marcus, The elderly woman's voice was unusually excited. I don't know what you did to my truck, but it's running better than it has in 20 years. The engine's so quiet I can barely hear it, and it's getting twice the gas mileage. You're a miracle worker. Marcus glanced at Zara, who was trying unsuccessfully to hide a small smile. Just, found the problem and fixed it properly, Mrs. Henderson. Well, I'm telling everyone in town about your magical touch with engines. You're going to have more business than you know what to do with. After Mrs. Henderson hung up, Marcus turned to Zara with raised eyebrows. Magical touch with engines? I made truck better, she said innocently. Was singing sad song about old age and where. I taught it new song about youth and strength. You gave my customer's pickup truck a musical tune-up. Is this wrong? Marcus considered this. On one hand, Zara had just performed what amounted to mechanical sorcery on a vehicle. On the other hand, Mrs. Henderson was happy, and he'd probably just gained a reputation as the best mechanic in 3 counties. No, he decided. I think it's fine. Just maybe warn me next time before you start singing to my customers' cars. The next few hours passed surprisingly peacefully. Zara followed Marcus around the shop as he worked on various vehicles, asking endless questions about human technology and occasionally humming soft melodies that made tools work more smoothly and engines purr with unprecedented efficiency. Marcus found himself explaining not just how things worked, but why humans built them the way they did, which led to fascinating discussions about the differences between their species. Your people build with metal and force, Zara observed as she watched him change oil in a sedan. My people build with song and intention. Both make things that work, but human way is more solid. Belmano. Is that good or bad? Different. Your machines will last long time without singing. My people's creations fade if music stops. She touched the car's hood thoughtfully. But your way is louder, harder, makes scars on universe. Marcus paused in his work. Scars, pollution, waste, noise that drowns out natural songs. Zara's expression wasn't judgmental, just sad. Most species go through this phase. Young races always think louder is better, stronger is superior. Usually they learn balance before they destroy themselves. Usually, some do not learn fast enough. The implications hung in the air between them. Marcus had never thought of human civilization as particularly young or crude, but from the perspective of a species that traveled between galaxies and considered the universe itself a musical instrument, perhaps humanity was still in its infancy. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Marcus's first customer of the day, Tom Bradley, who owned a construction company and drove a perpetually problematic bulldozer. Tom was a big, loud man who generally treated the world as something to be conquered rather than understood. Chunt, Tom boomed as he climbed down from his truck. Got that piece of junk dozer on the trailer. Things been acting up again, won't start half the time. Marcus was about to respond when he noticed Zara had gone very still beside him. Her skin had lost its warm glow, becoming almost transparent, and she was staring at Tom with an expression of growing alarm. What's wrong? Marcus asked quietly. His mind, Zara whispered. It sings wrong. Angry music. Violent harmonies. Tom approached them, his heavy boots clanging on the concrete floor. When he noticed Zara, his expression shifted into something unpleasant. Who's the kid? She's got some kind of skin condition or something? She's my niece. Marcus lied smoothly. Visiting for the summer. Weird-looking kid. That natural, or is she one of those goth types with all the makeup? Tom's tone was growing more aggressive, and Marcus felt Zara move closer to him. The makeup, Marcus said firmly. She's going through a phase. Now, about your bulldozer. But Tom wasn't listening. He was staring at Zara with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable. There's something off about her. Something that don't sit right. Suddenly, Tom's expression changed completely. His eyes became distant and unfocused, as if he was listening to something only he could hear. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, with an odd harmonic quality that made Marcus's teeth ache. The song-bearer hides among the primitives. How amusing. Marcus felt ice water flood his veins. Tom took a step toward Zara, and Marcus instinctively moved between them. I think you should leave, Tom. Bring your dozer back another day. Tom's head tilted in a way that was distinctly inhuman. The Death Singers have been searching for you, little star child. Your mother's sacrifice was quite melodious. She sang beautifully as we harvested her knowledge. Zara made a sound like a sob mixed with a scream. Marcus didn't plan. He simply grabbed a wrench from his workbench and swung it at Tom's head as hard as he could. The blow that should have knocked a man unconscious simply made Tom laugh. He caught Marcus's wrist with inhuman strength, and where their skin touched, Marcus felt a burning sensation accompanied by the sound of discordant music that seemed to come from inside his own bones. Interesting, Tom said, still in that wrong voice. The Guardian's protection is stronger than expected. No matter, the song-bearer will come willingly, or we will simply take the entire settlement. Marcus tried to pull free, but Tom's grip was like a steel trap. Then Zara stepped forward and began to sing. It wasn't like her previous gentle melodies. This was something primal and powerful, a sound that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of matter itself. The concrete floor began to vibrate, tools rattled on their hooks, and Tom's stolen body convulsed as two different forms of consciousness battled for control. "Get out of my head!" The real Tom Bradley fought his way back to the surface, his voice mixing with something else that sounded like grinding metal and dying stars. The possessing entity's presence shattered, releasing Tom so suddenly that he collapsed to his knees, gasping and shaking. Marcus caught him before he could hit the ground, noting that the man's skin was burning hot and his eyes were completely bloodshot. "What happened?" Tom mumbled weakly. "I was driving here, and then nothing. Did I have a stroke or something?" Marcus helped Tom to his feet, noting that Zara's song had faded to a gentle humming that seemed to be healing whatever damage the possession had caused. "You had some kind of seizure. You should get to a hospital and have yourself checked out." Tom nodded dazedly and stumbled back to his truck, clearly having no memory of the past few minutes. Marcus waited until he drove away before turning to Zara, who had sunk to her knees and was weeping tears that glowed like liquid silver. "Zara, what just happened?" "They found me," she whispered. "The Ketvar can enter minds from very far away if target is willing or weak." Tom Bradley. His anger made him vulnerable. "Is he going to be okay?" "Yes." I sang the dark music out of him. She looked up at Marcus with desperate eyes. "But now they know where I am. They will send more than just voices next time." Marcus helped her to her feet, his mind racing. If the Death Singers could possess random townspeople, then nowhere was truly safe. But something bothered him about the encounter. "Zara, if they can take over people's minds, why haven't they possessed me?" "I told you, you have silent mind. They cannot enter." She paused, considering. "But they can send others to hurt you physically. And if I stay here, everyone in town will be in danger. Then we don't stay here." Zara stared at him. "Marcus, if staying puts people at risk, we leave. Simple as that." Marcus was surprised by his own certainty, but the logic was clear. "You said I'm a guardian, right? Then it's my job to protect you. And protecting you means making sure innocent people don't get caught in the crossfire. Where would we go?" Marcus considered this. If they were dealing with beings that could possess people and had starships, they needed help from someone who understood this kind of threat. Unfortunately, there wasn't exactly a government department for alien refugees listed in the phone book. Then, he remembered something from his science fiction reading, a constant piece of advice that appeared in nearly every first contact story he'd ever encountered. "We need to find others like you," he said. "Other refugees, other guardians. There has to be some kind of underground network for this sort of thing." Zara's eyes widened. "You think there are more?" "Honey, if you ended up in my backyard, and I turn out to be exactly what you needed, then this can't be the first time something like this has happened. The universe might be big, but coincidences that convenient usually aren't coincidences at all." For the first time since Tom's possession, Zara smiled. "You think like a singer, looking for patterns in the music." Marcus started gathering essential tools and supplies, his mind already working on practical details. They'd need transportation, money, and, most importantly, information about where to find help. "Zara, can you sense other members of your people? Like a song radar?" "From close distance, yes. But," she hesitated, "the deep song shows me things sometimes. Visions of other lost ones, other guardians. I have seen faces places, but not always clearly. Any of those faces look familiar? Anyone you might have seen on TV or the internet?" Zara closed her eyes, and for a moment her skin glowed brighter. When she opened them again, she looked excited. There is one. A woman with dark skin and kind eyes. She works with broken machines in a place of learning. Marcus felt a spark of hope. A professor? An engineer? Yes. She fixes things that others say cannot be fixed. And she sings very quietly, so quietly that most do not hear. It wasn't much to go on, but it was something. Marcus finished packing his tools and grabbed his laptop. If there was a professor somewhere who specialized in fixing impossible problems and happened to be a guardian, then the internet would help them find her. As they prepared to leave the only home Marcus had known for 10 years, he found himself thinking about the strange turns his life had taken. 2 days ago, he would have called anyone claiming to be protecting alien refugees completely insane. Now he was about to become a fugitive from interdimensional death singers while traveling with a little girl who could heal machines with lullabies. And somehow, despite the danger and uncertainty, Marcus felt more alive than he had in years. For the first time since his parents died, he had a purpose that extended beyond just getting through each day. He was protecting someone who needed him, standing against forces that would hurt the innocent, and maybe even helping to save an entire species. It wasn't the life he planned, but as he locked up his shop and loaded their meager supplies into his truck, Marcus realized it was exactly the life he wanted. "Ready?" he asked Zara as she settled into the passenger seat. "Ready," she replied, then added something in her musical language that translated roughly to "thank you for choosing to run toward danger instead of away from it." Marcus started the engine, which purred with the improved performance Zara had given it the previous night, and pulled onto the highway. Behind them, Millfield disappeared into the distance, along with everything safe and familiar in his world. Ahead of them lay the unknown, filled with alien hunters, possessed humans, and a universe far stranger and more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. But also filled with music, wonder, and the possibility that sometimes ordinary people could do extraordinary things when the stakes were high enough. Marcus pressed down on the accelerator and drove toward whatever came next. The third day of their journey found Marcus and Zara in a truck stop outside Denver, surrounded by the peculiar democracy of travelers who mind their own business. Marcus nursed his fourth cup of coffee while Zara sat across from him in the booth, carefully dissecting a blueberry muffin with scientific precision. "Still trying to understand Earth food?" Marcus asked with amusement. "Your nutrition is so chunky," Zara replied, holding up a blueberry to examine it in the fluorescent light. "Everything has pieces inside pieces inside pieces." Over the past 2 days, they'd fallen into an odd but comfortable routine. Marcus did most of the talking when they encountered other people, explaining Zara as his niece who had a rare genetic condition that affected her appearance. Most people accepted this without question, though Marcus caught them staring at her hair, which continued to float as if underwater despite all attempts to make it behave normally. The internet search for their mysterious professor had yielded promising results. Dr. Keiko Tanaka, a robotics engineer at MIT, had a reputation for taking on impossible projects and somehow making them work. Her published papers read like science fiction: artificial intelligence that could learn empathy, machines that repaired themselves, robots that seemed to understand concepts they'd never been programmed to recognize. More interestingly, several of her former students had posted online about her uncanny ability to know exactly what was wrong with a machine just by touching it. "She sounds like someone who might understand singing to engines," Marcus had told Zara, who agreed that Dr. Tanaka's signature felt familiar when shown her photograph. They'd been driving toward Boston for 2 days when Zara began exhibiting signs of distress. It started small. She would pause mid-sentence and cock her head as if listening to something Marcus couldn't hear. By the second evening, she was barely eating and spent long periods staring at the sky with an expression of growing anxiety. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked as they checked into another roadside motel. "You've been acting strange since we left Colorado." Zara sat heavily on the bed, her usual graceful movements replaced by obvious exhaustion. "The hunters are getting closer. I can feel their ships in the deep space above your world." "How many ships?" "Many. Too many." She looked at him with worry. "Marcus, I think I made a mistake. Coming to Earth. They will hurt your people to find me." Marcus sat beside her on the bed. "Hey, we've talked about this. You didn't have a choice about where to go, and we're going to find Dr. Tanaka and figure out how to deal with this. But what if she cannot help? What if there's no help? It was the first time Zara had voiced what Marcus knew they'd both been thinking. They were running toward hope based on nothing more than a hunch and a few internet search results. For all they knew, Dr. Tanaka was simply a very good engineer with no connection to alien refugees whatsoever. Marcus was about to respond when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize with a Boston area code. "Marcus Chun," he answered cautiously. "Mr. Chun, this is Dr. Keiko Tanaka from MIT. I believe you've been looking for me." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. He hadn't contacted the professor yet. They planned to approach her in person rather than risk phone calls that might be monitored. "Dr. Tanaka? How did you get this number?" "The same way I knew you'd be traveling with a young Veltari refugee and heading in my direction." Her voice was crisp and professional with just a hint of warmth. "Is she injured? The harmonics coming from your location suggest she's under considerable stress." Marcus looked at Zara, who had gone very still. "You can sense her from there?" "I can sense all of them, Mr. Chun. Every lost one, every guardian, every hunter closing in on our world. That's what we do." A pause. "I'm sending you an address. Come immediately. We have very little time." The line went dead, and within seconds Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message containing an address and the words, "Use the service entrance. Tell the guard that the stars are singing tonight." Zara was staring at him with wide eyes. She knows everything," Marcus said, grabbing their bags. "Come on, I think our search is over." The address Dr. Tanaka had provided led them to a nondescript warehouse in an industrial district outside Boston. Marcus pulled up to a loading dock where a security guard who looked suspiciously alert for 3 in the morning was waiting for them. "Stars are singing tonight," Marcus said through the window. The guard nodded and waved them through. "Bay 7. Dr. Tanaka is waiting." Bay 7 turned out to be an enormous space filled with what looked like a cross between a laboratory and a spaceship hangar. Gleaming machines Marcus couldn't identify hummed quietly along the walls, and workbenches covered with devices that definitely weren't of human origin occupied the center of the floor. But what caught his attention were the people. There were perhaps 20 individuals scattered throughout the space, and not all of them were entirely human. Marcus saw a tall woman with skin that seemed to be made of living crystal, a man whose arms had been replaced with mechanical appendages that moved with fluid grace, and what appeared to be a teenage boy whose shadow fell in directions that had nothing to do with the lighting. And everywhere, working alongside these extraordinary beings, were people who looked perfectly normal, until Marcus noticed the way they moved, the quiet confidence in their postures, and the alert intelligence in their eyes that reminded him of his own reflection over the past few days. "Guardians," Zara whispered in wonder. "Welcome to the Underground Railroad," said a voice behind them. Marcus turned to see Dr. Keiko Tanaka approaching. She was a small, neat woman in her 50s with graying hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. But what struck Marcus most was the sense of calm authority she radiated, as if she'd been dealing with interdimensional refugees and alien hunters for so long that it had become routine. "Dr. Tanaka," Marcus said. "I'm Marcus Chun, and this is Zuravel St. Tel Veltar, bearer of the deep song and daughter of Melody Keeper Syra." Dr. Tanaka smiled at Zara's shocked expression. "Your mother and I have been corresponding for some time. She helped me understand why certain machines seem to respond to emotional intention rather than just programming." "Mother's alive?" Zara's voice was barely a whisper. Dr. Tanaka's expression grew gentle but sad. "I'm sorry, child. The last message I received was her warning that the Kethvar had found your hiding place. She managed to encode your escape trajectory in the transmission, but..." She shook her head. The signal cut off abruptly. Zara's legs gave out, and Marcus caught her before she could fall. The grief that poured off her was almost visible, a silver shimmer in the air around her body. "I felt her die," Zara said through tears. "But I hoped. I thought maybe..." "She made sure you survived," Dr. Tanaka said firmly. "That was her choice, her sacrifice, and her victory over the hunters. Don't let her gift be wasted on grief." As Marcus held Zara while she wept, Dr. Tanaka began explaining the operation he'd stumbled into. The underground network had been operating for nearly 15 years, ever since the first refugees began arriving on Earth. Guardians were apparently more common than anyone had expected. Roughly 1 in a million humans had the psychic immunity that allowed them to resist mental manipulation and influence. Most Guardians never realize what they are, Dr. Tanaka explained as she led them deeper into the facility. They just go through life being the person others turn to in a crisis, the one who always keeps their head in chaos, the individual who somehow knows the right thing to do even when all evidence suggests they're making a terrible mistake. That sounds familiar, Marcus muttered. The refugees find us, not the other way around. Something in their survival instincts guides them to Guardians who are ready to accept the truth about the universe. She gestured around the warehouse. We provide safe harbor, help them establish new identities, and, when possible, reunite them with others of their species. And the Death Singers just let this happen. Dr. Tanaka's expression hardened. The Kethvar are powerful, but they're not omnipotent. Earth is still considered a backwater world by most galactic civilizations. The fact that we're developing Guardian abilities in significant numbers is unusual. Most species produce perhaps 1 Guardian per billion individuals. Why are humans different? No one knows for certain. Some refugees theorize that humanity is naturally resistant to psychic influence because we developed in isolation. Others believe it has something to do with our particular combination of creativity and stubbornness. She smiled slightly. Personally, I think we're just too chaotic for most forms of mental control to work properly. Zara had recovered enough to walk on her own, though she stayed close to Marcus as Dr. Tanaka showed them around the facility. They saw workshops where refugees taught Guardians how to maintain technologies that shouldn't exist, living quarters where families from dozens of different worlds had found new homes, and a communication center that somehow stayed in contact with resistance movements across the galaxy. This is incredible, Marcus said. How long have you been running this place? 7 years, but the network itself is much older. There are similar facilities on 6 continents, all connected, all working toward the same goal, which is survival, both for the refugees and for humanity itself. Dr. Tanaka stopped walking and turned to face them. Marcus, the Kethvar aren't just hunting individual refugees. They're working towards something much larger and much more dangerous. She led them to a large display screen that showed what appeared to be a star map. Red dots were scattered across the image, some blinking, some static. Each red that represents a world that the Kethvar have conquered. They don't just steal songs and knowledge. They strip entire civilizations of their creativity, their art, their ability to dream and grow. What's left behind is a population of beings who can work and reproduce, but can't innovate or aspire to anything beyond basic survival. Marcus felt cold horror creeping up his spine. How many worlds? Thousands. And they're accelerating the pace of conquest. Dr. Tanaka touched the screen, and new information appeared. According to our sources, they're planning something called the Great Silence, a coordinated attack on every remaining free world simultaneously, including Earth. Earth is particularly valuable to them because of our high Guardian population. If they can break our resistance, they'll have access to beings who are naturally immune to their primary weapons. Guardian-derived soldiers would be. She paused, searching for words. Imagine an army that couldn't be mentally controlled, manipulated, or broken by psychic torture. Zara spoke up for the first time since learning about her mother's fate. When Dr. Tanaka looked grim. Our best estimates suggest 6 months, maybe less. The weight of this information settled over Marcus like a lead blanket. He thought he was just helping one scared child escape from cosmic bullies. Now it turned out he was part of a resistance movement against forces that wanted to lobotomize entire civilizations, and Earth itself was on the target list. What can we do, he asked. That depends on Zura. Dr. Tanaka turned to address the girl directly. The deep song you carry isn't just a collection of your people's musical knowledge. It's a weapon. Zara looked startled. Mother never said, because she hoped it would never be necessary. The deep song contains harmonics that can disrupt Kethvar technology on a massive scale. In theory, it could disable their entire fleet if properly amplified and broadcast. In theory, it's never been tested, and Using it would require Zara to project the song at full power, which Dr. Tanaka hesitated, which would almost certainly kill her. Marcus felt something cold and sharp twist in his chest. No, absolutely not. We're not sacrificing a child to save the world. Marcus, Zara said quietly, if it means stopping the hunters, saving other worlds. No, Marcus repeated firmly. There has to be another way. Dr. Tanaka studied him for a long moment. Actually, there might be, but it would require something that's never been attempted before. What? Guardian Song Fusion. If a guardian could somehow link with a singer deeply enough to share the psychic load, it might be possible to broadcast the deep song without killing the singer. Has anyone ever tried this? The theory exists, but the practical application would be, Dr. Tanaka spread her hands. We'd be making it up as we go along. Marcus looked at Zara, who was watching him with those ancient eyes. In 3 days, she'd gone from a terrified refugee to a young girl beginning to process her grief, to someone being asked to potentially sacrifice herself for the greater good. The fact that she was even considering it made Marcus's heart ache. How much time do we have to figure this out? He asked. Based on the psychic disturbances Zara has been detecting, I'd say the advanced scouts are already in your solar system. We have maybe 2 weeks before the main fleet arrives. 2 weeks to master an untested psychic technique that might save both Zara and the world. Marcus had worked under deadline pressure before, but never quite like this. Where do we start? Dr. Tanaka smiled, and for the first time since they'd arrived, she looked genuinely optimistic. With the most basic guardian training ever attempted, we're going to teach you to hear the music of the universe, Marcus, and then we're going to hope that your silent mind can learn to sing. As alarms began sounding throughout the facility, indicating that long-range sensors had detected something approaching Earth, Marcus realized that their real adventure was just beginning. Everything up until now had been prologue. Now came the part where they saved the world. The training was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced, and he'd been through basic military conditioning in his younger years. But learning to hear the cosmic symphony that Zara and the other refugees perceived required him to fundamentally rewire his understanding of reality. Stop thinking with your brain, Dr. Tanaka instructed on the 4th day of intensive sessions. Guardians who successfully link with singers report that the experience is more like emotional mathematics. You're not learning to hear music, you're learning to feel the structural harmony that underlies existence. Marcus sat in meditation position on the floor of the training room, Zara cross-legged beside him. Around them, various alien technologies hummed and chirped, creating what Dr. Tanaka called a harmonic-rich environment that would supposedly make it easier for him to detect the universal frequencies. So far, all Marcus had detected was a mild headache and growing frustration. I'm not getting anything, he said, opening his eyes. Just the normal sounds of machinery. Zara reached over and took his hand. Feel, don't listen, she said softly. The deep song isn't something your ears can hear. It's something your spirit recognizes. When their skin touched, Marcus felt the now familiar tingle of psychic connection. But this time, instead of seeing Zara's memories or emotions, he became aware of something else entirely. It was like suddenly realizing he'd been standing in a vast cathedral his entire life, while believing he was in a small closet. The sensation lasted only seconds before fading. But in that brief moment, Marcus had perceived layers upon layers of harmonic complexity surrounding them. The hum of the alien machines wasn't random noise. It was part of an enormous symphony that included the vibrations of atoms, the rotation of planets, the nuclear fusion of distant stars, and the thoughts and emotions of every living being within light years. Did you feel it? Zara asked eagerly. Yeah, for just a second. Marcus rubbed his temples, trying to process what he'd experienced. It's huge. How do you stand being aware of all that all the time? You learn to filter, to focus on the parts that matter for what you're doing. Zara's expression grew serious. But, Marcus, when you touched the deep song just now, something happened that I've never seen before. What? It got quieter. Usually, when someone connects to the universal harmony, it becomes louder, more intense. But your silent mind actually made the deep song more peaceful, controlled. Dr. Tanaka had been monitoring their session from across the room, and she looked up sharply from her instruments. Interesting. The harmonic readings show a stabilization pattern I haven't seen in 15 years of studying these connections. Is that good? It might be exactly what we need. Dr. Tanaka approached them, checking readings on a device that looked like a cross between a tuning fork and a seismometer. The theoretical problem with broadcasting the deep song at full power is that it's inherently chaotic. The pure creative force contained in those harmonics could potentially tear holes in space-time if not properly controlled. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Tear holes in space-time. Think of it like the difference between a laser and an explosion. Both can release enormous amounts of energy, but one is focused and controlled while the other is pure destruction. Dr. Tanaka sat down beside them. If your guardian abilities can act as a focusing lens for Zara's song, we might be able to create a targeted weapon instead of a cosmic disaster. Over the following days, Marcus and Zara practiced their connection under increasingly complex conditions. They learned to maintain psychic contact while moving, while under stress, and while surrounded by the chaotic harmonics created by other refugees practicing their own musical abilities. Marcus discovered that his silent mind didn't just block psychic intrusion, it could actively dampen and organize psychic emanations around him. When Zara sang near him, her naturally powerful abilities became more precise, more controlled. Other refugees in the facility began seeking him out, asking for help with techniques they'd been struggling to master for years. It's like you're a psychic capacitor, explained Velwayanen, the woman with crystalline skin who turned out to be from a species that communicated entirely through controlled light emissions. You absorb the chaotic energy and release it back in a more stable form. But the most significant breakthrough came during their 7th day of training, when the facility's long-range sensors detected the main Kethvar fleet dropping out of hyperspace near Jupiter. Marcus was in the middle of a particularly challenging exercise, trying to help Zara project a complex healing song into a badly damaged alien device, when every alarm in the building began screaming simultaneously. "They're here," Dr. Tanaka announced over the facility's intercom system. "All refugees to secure positions. All guardians to the command center." As they rushed through the corridors, Marcus caught glimpses of the organized chaos that the facility became during an emergency. Refugees who looked human enough were changing into normal clothes and preparing false identifications. Others were entering what appeared to be stasis pods that would hide their non-human energy signatures. Still others were arming themselves with weapons that Marcus definitely didn't want to be on the wrong end of. The command center was a large room dominated by displays showing Earth's orbital space. Dozens of red dots had appeared near Jupiter, and they were moving toward the inner system with purposeful intent. "How many ships?" Marcus asked. 237 that we can detect, replied the technician monitoring the sensors. "Probably more using stealth technology." Dr. Tanaka was studying tactical displays with a grim expression. "They're not heading directly for Earth. They're taking positions throughout the solar system, setting up a containment grid." "Containment for what?" "For us. They know about the Underground Railroad now, which means they know Earth has an unusual number of guardians. They're not planning to just invade, they're planning to harvest." Marcus felt Zara's hand slip into his. Her skin was cold with fear, but her voice was steady. "How long before they reach Earth?" 6 hours, maybe 7. "Then, we need to try the fusion now," Zara said quietly, "before they can land ground forces." Dr. Tanaka turned to them. "Are you sure? We've only had a week to practice, and the theoretical calculations suggest that it might not work," Marcus finished. "But staying here and hiding won't work either. If they're planning to harvest guardians, then all the refugees we're protecting become weapons pointed at their own people." The decision, once made, moved with terrifying speed. Within an hour, the facility's most powerful harmonic amplification equipment had been reconfigured for their attempt. Marcus and Zara were placed in the center of a circle of crystalline resonators that would, in theory, boost and focus their combined psychic output to interplanetary range. "Remember," Dr. Tanaka said as she made final adjustments to the equipment, "your job isn't to sing the deep song yourself. Your job is to provide stability and focus for Zara's voice. Think of yourself as a lens, not a light source." Marcus nodded. though he wasn't entirely sure he understood the distinction. The theoretical training was one thing, but they were about to attempt something that had never been done before, with the survival of Earth potentially hanging in the balance. "Marcus," Zara said as they took their positions, "if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I want you to know that these past days have been the happiest of my life since Mother died. You gave me hope when I had none. You made me believe that someone could care about me, just because I needed help." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Hey, we're going to get through this, and then we're going to figure out what normal life looks like for a guardian and a cosmic refugee. Maybe I'll teach you how to make pancakes properly." Zara smiled through her tears. "I would like that." Dr. Tanaka gave them the signal, and Zara began to sing. The deep song was nothing like her gentle lullabies or the healing melodies Marcus had heard before. This was the musical equivalent of a supernova, raw creative force that contained the birth song of stars, the death whisper of galaxies, and every note of beauty and wonder that her people had discovered in their eons of cosmic wandering. The power of it hit Marcus like a tsunami. Without his guardian training, the deep song would have instantly overwhelmed his mind, leaving him as an empty shell. Even with his psychic defenses, the force of Zara's voice was almost more than he could contain. But instead of trying to block or resist the song, Marcus opened his silent mind and embraced it. He felt the chaotic energies of the deep song flowing into him, seeking structure and purpose, and somehow, miraculously, he was able to provide both. The sensation was like trying to hold lightning in his bare hands while directing it into specific patterns. Marcus felt his consciousness expanding far beyond his physical body as Zara's song carried both of them into the cosmic harmony that connected all things. He could feel the Kethvar fleet approaching Earth, their ships like discordant notes in a universal symphony, their minds burning with hunger for the songs they wanted to steal. And then he and Zara began to sing back. The deep song, filtered through Marcus's stabilizing influence, reached out across space with surgical precision. Instead of the uncontrolled explosion of psychic energy that the song would normally produce, it became a focused beam of harmonic disruption that struck the Kethvar fleet with devastating accuracy. Through their connection, Marcus felt the moment when the alien ships began to fail. The Kethvar technology relied heavily on psychic interfaces and song-based control systems, exactly the things that the deep song was designed to disrupt. Navigation failed first, then life support, then the mental link that allowed the Death Singers to coordinate their fleet movements. But the effort was taking a terrible toll on both of them. Marcus could feel his consciousness beginning to fray around the edges as he struggled to contain energies that were never meant to be channeled through a human mind. Zara's physical body was beginning to fail as well. Her silver skin was becoming transparent, and her hair was starting to fade from white to gray. "We're dying," she whispered through their psychic link. "Hold on," Marcus replied, pouring every ounce of his determination into maintaining their connection. "Just a little longer." The deep song reached its crescendo, and suddenly, the harmonic disruption propagating through space encountered something unexpected. The song struck not just the Kethvar fleet, but also the psychic network that connected all the Death Singers across the galaxy. For one brilliant moment, the deep song was broadcast to every corner of space where the Kethvar had spread their influence. And everywhere it touched, their stolen songs began to remember their origins. Marcus felt the moment when thousands of enslaved civilizations suddenly recalled what they had lost. Worlds that had been silent for centuries began to sing again. Species that had forgotten how to dream suddenly remembered their capacity for wonder and creativity. The psychic shockwave that resulted from this mass awakening was more than the Death Singers could absorb. Their entire civilization, built on stolen music and suppressed creativity, began to collapse as their victims reclaimed their voices. Marcus and Zara maintained their connection for perhaps 30 seconds of real time, an eternity in the stretched perception of cosmic awareness. When they finally broke apart, both collapsing to the floor of the chamber, the displays around them showed that every Kethvar ship in the solar system had gone dark. "Status report," Dr. Tanaka called out as medical teams rushed to check on Marcus and Zara. "All hostile contacts have ceased movement," the sensor technician reported with awe in his voice. I'm reading massive power failures across their entire fleet. And the harmonic disruption wave? Still propagating outward at light speed. Conservative estimates suggest it will reach the nearest Kethvar stronghold in approximately 43 years. Marcus struggled to sit up, his body feeling like he'd been run over by a train. 43 years? But we felt it working immediately. Dr. Tanaka helped him to his feet. The deep song operates on multiple dimensional levels simultaneously. The psychic effects are instantaneous, but the harmonic disruption travels at light speed through normal space. What you felt was the psychic network collapse. The actual technology failures will spread gradually as the song reaches each system. Zara was conscious, but barely, her skin now completely translucent, and her voice weak as a whisper. Do we save them? You saved everyone, Dr. Tanaka said gently. The readings suggest that every world the Kethvar conquered is beginning to recover their cultural identity. It will take time, but the great silence has been stopped before it could begin. Marcus reached for Zara's hand and was relieved to feel her grip, though it was much weaker than before. What about you? Are you going to be okay? I don't know. The deep song is different now. Quieter. I think I gave away most of my people's music to help the stolen songs find their way home. She smiled faintly. But maybe that's what it was always meant for. Dr. Tanaka was consulting medical readouts from the alien devices monitoring Zara's condition. The good news is that she's stable. The deep song didn't kill her. It changed her. She's becoming something new. New how? She's still Veltari, but she's also something else now. Something that's never existed before. A singer who can teach others to hear the music instead of carrying it all herself. Marcus felt a weight lift from his chest that he hadn't realized was there. Zara was alive. The Kethvar threat was ended. And somehow they'd managed to accomplish the impossible. But as he looked around at the facility filled with refugees from dozens of worlds, Marcus realized that their real work was just beginning. Earth was about to become the focal point for rebuilding an entire galactic civilization. And someone would need to help coordinate between humans and the hundreds of alien species who would be looking for guidance in rediscovering their lost songs. So, he said to Dr. Tanaka, I guess the Underground Railroad is about to become a lot less underground. Dr. Tanaka smiled. Welcome to the new era of galactic civilization, Marcus. I hope you're ready for the next adventure. Marcus looked at Zara, who despite her weakened condition was humming a soft melody that seemed to make the air around them sparkle with possibility, and realized that he absolutely was. 6 months after the day that would later be known as the Great Awakening, Marcus stood in what had once been his small auto repair shop and marveled at how much his life had changed. The building now served as the North American headquarters for the Galactic Cultural Restoration Project, and his former customer parking lot had been converted into a landing pad for ships that still made him shake his head in wonder. Marcus, Zara called from across the bustling main floor. The delegation from Kepler 442b is here for their music therapy session. Marcus looked up from the reports he'd been reviewing, status updates from 17 different worlds where former Kethvar slaves were relearning their cultural identities with the help of Guardian-trained therapists. The work was slow and often heartbreaking, but the progress was undeniable. Zara approached him with her characteristic floating walk, though she moved more slowly than she had before their fusion with the deep song. The experience had changed her in ways they were still discovering. Her skin was no longer silver, but had taken on a soft, pearlescent quality that seemed to shift between human and Veltari depending on the light. Her hair had grown back, but now was streaked with strands that looked like captured starlight. Most importantly, her role had fundamentally shifted. Instead of carrying the songs of her people alone, she had become something like a cosmic music teacher, able to help other beings reconnect with their lost cultural harmonies, while also training humans to hear and work with the universal frequencies. How are they doing? Marcus asked, gesturing toward the group of tall, ethereal beings who were settling into the therapy circle Dr. Tanaka had designed. Better than last week. 3 of them were able to remember fragments of their traditional greeting songs. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. Zara's expression grew sad. Their people were enslaved for over 800 years. The Kethvar were very thorough in their cultural destruction. Marcus nodded. They'd learned that the Kethvar's conquest strategy was devastatingly effective. First, they would invade and defeat a world's military forces. Then, instead of ruling through conventional occupation, they would use their psychic abilities to slowly drain away everything that made a civilization unique: their art, their music, their stories, their dreams of what they could become. The result was populations that could work, reproduce, and maintain basic technological societies, but had lost the capacity for innovation, creativity, or cultural growth. Entire species had become living ghosts of themselves, going through the motions of existence without remembering what it felt like to truly live. The Great Awakening had broken the psychic chains that held these civilizations prisoner, but recovery was proving to be a complex and lengthy process. Many beings had lived their entire lives without experiencing joy, wonder, or artistic expression. Learning to feel these emotions again was like teaching someone to use muscles that had been paralyzed for decades. "Any word from the medical team working on the Kethvar prisoners?" Marcus asked. 3 months after their fleet had been disabled, Earth's combined human-alien medical teams had made a disturbing discovery. The Kethvar themselves were victims of their own system. Their species had originally been musical beings, much like the Veltari, but they had fallen into a cultural trap thousands of years ago when they discovered that stealing songs was easier than creating them. Over countless generations, they had lost the ability to generate original music, becoming dependent on what they could take from others. By the time they began their galactic conquest, the Kethvar were essentially addicts, driven by an uncontrollable hunger for the creative energies they could no longer produce themselves. "Dr. Reyes says they're making progress with the withdrawal therapy," Zara replied. 12 of the former Death Singers have managed to create simple, original melodies. It's crude work compared to their stolen capabilities, but it's theirs. Marcus felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sympathy. The beings who had terrorized the galaxy for millennia were, in many ways, just as much victims as the civilizations they had enslaved. Breaking the cycle of cultural theft and helping the Kethvar rediscover their own creative abilities was proving to be one of the most challenging aspects of the restoration project. "Speaking of progress," Zara said with a smile that still made Marcus's heart skip a beat, "I have something to show you." She led him through the facility to a room that had once been his apartment bedroom. Now it served as a quiet space for private consultations and meditation. But today it contained something special. In the center of the room sat a small device that looked like a cross between a musical instrument and a piece of abstract sculpture. Its surface was smooth and organic, growing for what appeared to be crystallized song, given physical form. "Is that," Marcus began, "the first new deep song created since my people began their wandering," Zara said proudly. "It's not as complex or powerful as the original, but it's entirely original. Born from the collaboration between recovering Kethvar singers and a group of human musicians from the Boston Symphony Orchestra." Marcus stared at the device in amazement. A human Kethvar musical collaboration? 6 months ago, that would have been impossible. 6 months ago, a lot of things would have been impossible, including a guardian and a refugee saving the galaxy by singing together. They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the soft harmonics emanating from the crystallized song. The music was unlike anything Marcus had heard before. It contained elements that were recognizably human, sections that had the flowing beauty of Veltari composition, and underlying themes that carried the complex mathematical precision that was apparently characteristic of healthy Kethvar music. "It's beautiful," Marcus said finally. "It's hope," Zara corrected. "Proof that different species can create something together that none of them could achieve alone." Marcus was about to respond when his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and sighed. Senator Williams. Probably another update on the UN's cosmic policy debates. The past 6 months had seen humanity struggling to adapt to the reality of being part of a galactic community. The revelation that Earth was home to an unusual number of guardians had made the planet a crucial hub for the restoration efforts. But it had also created enormous challenges for human governments and institutions. Some people embraced humanity's new role with enthusiasm, seeing it as the beginning of a golden age of interstellar cooperation and cultural exchange. Others were terrified by the implications of sharing the universe with beings who could manipulate technology with their thoughts and create matter from pure sound. The compromise that had eventually emerged was a joint human-alien council that oversaw all restoration activities on Earth, with strict protocols for protecting both human autonomy and refugee safety. It was messy, bureaucratic, and frequently frustrating, but it was working. Marcus Chun, he answered the phone. Mr. Chun, this is Senator Williams. I'm calling with good news. The UN Security Council has just voted to officially recognize the Galactic Cultural Restoration Project as a permanent international institution. Marcus felt a surge of relief. There had been significant political pressure to shut down or severely restrict the restoration efforts, with critics arguing that Earth was taking on too much responsibility for problems that weren't originally humanity's fault. That's excellent news, Senator. What changed their minds? The economic impact reports, mainly. The technology sharing agreements with the recovering civilizations are projected to advance human development by at least 50 years. Plus, the cultural exchange programs are already revolutionizing our understanding of art, music, and science. It was true. The presence of refugees from dozens of different worlds had exposed humanity to perspectives and capabilities that were transforming every aspect of human civilization. Human musicians were learning to compose with mathematics and emotion simultaneously. Scientists were discovering that consciousness itself could be a form of technology. Artists were exploring creative mediums that existed in dimensions humans had never known were accessible. There is one condition, Senator Williams continued. The Council wants to establish formal diplomatic protocols with the major recovering civilizations. They're asking if you would be willing to serve as humanity's first ambassador for galactic cultural affairs. Marcus looked at Zara, who had clearly heard both sides of the